This recording will cover Chapter 6 in your textbook, Developing Post-School Goals. All right, so here are the learning objectives, understanding IDA requirements, stuff like that. Understand Indicator 13 requirements for writing measurable post-secondary goals. And you can find more information about Indicator 13 on page 41, as I mentioned in a few minutes in the PowerPoint, but basically the textbook says, to track implementation of its transition mandates, the Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP, O-S-E-P, developed Indicator 13. This indicator required that all reports to the federal government set goals and report annually on the percent of youth with IEPs age 16 and above with an IEP that includes appropriate measurable post-secondary goals that are annually updated and based upon an age-appropriate transition assessment and transition services, including courses of study that will reasonably enable the student to meet those post-secondary goals and annual IEP goals related to the student's transition services needs. IDEA is very wordy, by the way. But again, that is on page 41 of your textbook, and they also talk about Indicator 14 as well, which I will talk about in just one second. So if you're not familiar with Indicator 13, you may want to go back in the textbook and look at that. So we also want to think about different transition planning approaches, how to develop a planning team, stuff like this. Okay, here's a chapter organizer. The big question, how can we develop achievable transition goals based on the students, and here it is again, PINs, even though I like to call it SPIN, but that's okay. Preferences, interests, needs, and strengths. So keep that acronym. Again, I think in chapter 5, it calls it SPINs, strengths, preferences, interests, and needs. But here they call it PINs, so, you know, potato, potato, whatever. But just keep that in mind. And that's how we want, you know, that's what we want to think about and incorporate when we are transition planning for our students. So IDEA 2004, remember, the IEP must include appropriate measurable post-secondary goals. So when they leave high school, right, based upon age-appropriate transition assessments related to training, education, employment, and, if it's appropriate, independent living skills. All right, so we're going to talk about those things. So we want to think about, what does it mean for competitive employment? Well, this would be a former student is competitively employed if working for pay at or above the minimum wage, which keeps going up, right, in a setting with others who are non-disabled for a period of 20 hours a week for at least 90 days in the year since leaving high school. So that's how competitive employment is defined. And again, this comes back to Indicator 41, and you can go on pages 41 and 40, Indicator 14, and then you can go on pages 41 and 42 in your textbook. That's where it talks about those indicators the first time. Okay, so I just skipped a page, didn't I? Okay, so that's competitive employment. So then what does it mean to be enrolled in higher education? So this is, again, a measurable post-school goals defined. Goal or goals. A former student is enrolled in higher education if, typo from the publishers, people, if he or she has been enrolled on a full or part-time basis in a community college, okay, some sort of a 2-year program, or college university 4 or more year program for at least one. These publishers did not do a very good job editing. This is not me, thank you very much. For at least one complete term at any time in the year since leaving high school. Okay, so are they enrolled in a community college, which I actually was just talking to a teacher out in the district, and she said she heard something on NPR that like 75% of all community college students over the past 2 years have dropped out, unfortunately. So just kind of something to think about. But so what about these students? Are they enrolled in a community college, college and university? And this will come to play, this college and university, at the end of the semester when I have you look at college and university programs for students with disabilities. So kind of just keep all this in mind as a measurable post-school goal. Okay, some more measurable post-school goals. There are big words in this chapter, y'all. Enrollment in less than a 2-year program. So this is something like Job Corps, or I actually did AmeriCorps, adult education, workforce development, vocational technical school, stuff like that, of less than 2 years for one complete term at any time since leaving high school. All right, so that still is measurable. It's a post-school goal. And then what about engagement in other employment? So this could be sheltered employment, jobs where the former students work for less than 20 hours per week, including working in a family business, and again, for 90 days or more at any time since leaving high school. So kind of giving us some, some measurements and some numbers of how we could actually measure those goals. Okay, so coming back to indicator 13, and this is kind of what I just read for it to you. Percent of youth with IEPs age 16 and above with an IEP that includes appropriate, measurable post-secondary goals, and I think really the key word is appropriate, that are annually updated and based upon an age-appropriate transition assessment. So that's what we talked about in chapter 5, right? Those transition assessments and how they then lead to the goals and then the IEP, okay? And I'll show you some examples in just a second of some appropriate goals and some not so appropriate goals. So let me just get there in a few seconds. So couple couple points, a checklist for indicator 13. Is there an appropriate measurable post-secondary goal or goals that covers education or training, employment, and as needed? Again, if appropriate, independent living. Independent living might not be an appropriate goal for every student, right? You have to really look at where they are, look at those assessments, those transition assessments, and also look at their spins, right? Their strengths, preference, interests, and needs. Oh, look, it says that down here. I get ahead of myself. Are there identified post-secondary goals in education or training? And again, employment and if applicable, independent living, again, based on the student present levels. Oh, going back to that, present levels of academic and functional performance and the student spins. I really do. I get ahead of myself. So some more indicators for checklists for indicator 13. Are the post-secondary goals updated annually? Or are they written once and then see you later, the student doesn't get any more services or supports, and then they just stick with those same goals for the next like 5 years, which is not good, right? For each post-secondary goal, is there evidence that at least one age-appropriate transition assessment was used to provide information on the student's spins regarding the post-secondary goals? So we want to make sure there's at least one age-appropriate transition assessment. And again, if you're forgetting those, go back to chapter 5 to provide this information so that the goals can be developed from this information. All, the student spins regarding the secondary, post-secondary goals. Couple other parts of the checklist. Is there a type of instruction, related service, community experience, or development of employment or other post-school adult living objectives? And if appropriate, again, acquisition of daily living skills and provision of a functional vocational evaluation listed in association with meeting the post-secondary goal. Whew, that's a lot. And then for each of the post-secondary goal areas, is there an annual goal or short-term objective included in the IEP related to the student's transition services needs? So if there's a goal about transition, or for each of the goal areas, there should be an annual goal in the IEP that is related to the student's transition services needs. And you're gonna probably fall off your chairs in just a second when I tell you how early thinking about transition services should really start. So just hold on to your hats, but let me show you this first. So I want to show you figure 6-1 in the textbook. And of course, I'm not on the right one. I was there and then I moved it, people. So let me show you figure 6-1, which I think is on page 128. Yep. Okay, so, oh, wait a second. I outsmarted myself. Oh, really? No, I outsmarted myself. Figure 6-1, page 130. Okay, hold on one second. Don't pay any attention to me. Don't pay any attention. Okay, this is what I want to show you. So job characteristics I like. So this is something where, you could have the student answer these questions. They might need some help or some support. But what do I like? Do I like to work alone or do I like lots of people around? Okay, well, what's here at this job site? Am I working alone or are there lots of people around? So if the student checks works alone and then they're at a site where there's lots of people around, is that a match? No, right? So they would circle no, or you would circle no, whoever. Quiet workplace, quiet, noisy, work close to home, distance doesn't matter, weekdays only, weekends too, easy job or challenging job. So we want to find the ones, we want to find what the student likes, right? Their interests, their needs, their preferences. And then we want to find what is actually at the job site where they might currently be, or a job that they're looking at, and we want to find ones that matches, right? Or 5 of them. We want as many of them as possible to match, I should say. Okay, so now I'll come back to the textbook in a minute. So now get ready to fall off your chair. If you have not already looked at the PowerPoint, get ready. This is when your textbook suggests that thinking about transition and transition services and possible needs should start. Ready? Get ready. Grades 1 through 4, y'all. 1 through 4, first grade. So if you have a student, and this is not a student with a learning disability or something like that. This is someone maybe with autism or a more significant disability. Okay, learning disabilities, not really in the same category. This is for, again, kind of students who are more involved. So even in first grade, you'll kind of be able to think, oh yeah, they're going to need some transition services and transition supports as they get older. So you want to think about, employability and independent living skills and attitudes. Are we going to send a first grade student out to live by themselves? No, we're not. But if we can think about things like this, develop positive work habits, positive attitudes, stuff like that. Appreciate all types of work. So that kind of falls under some of the social studies curriculum that's out there now. Develop an understanding of how to cope with their disabilities, stuff like that. That's what we want them to think about, even as early as grades 1 through 4. All right, so then in your textbook on page 128, table 6-1, this tells you the same thing. Okay, so just so you know where to look in your textbook. All right, so then in grades 5 through 8, that kind of that middle school age, goals, we want them to think about career exploration and transition planning relative to course of study. So kind of starting to think, when they hit age 14 or maybe grade 8-ish, they're going to need to really have, really be thoughtful about their courses of study that they're going to need to get where they want to get to, get them where they want to go. So we need to start thinking about that. Understand interest, they're old enough to understand what they like, what they don't like, understand work, education, independent living, community options, all of these things, and thinking about a secondary course of study. Yes, this is middle school, but we want to start thinking about it. If you're on their team, you want to start thinking about it and start talking about it with the future teachers. Okay, and you want to think about transition services needed to participate in a desired course of study by no later than age 14. I know some places say 16, some places say 13, some places say 14. The textbook says 14. That's what IDEA says. So many letters. So that's what I'm sticking with. Okay, and then you want to start thinking about in high school. So grades 9 to 10. And if you think back, if you think about Thomas, our friend Thomas from a little while ago in the semester, there was year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. So thinking about how transition might relate to our friend Thomas. Okay, so grades 9 to 10, this is where we really want to start exploring careers, transition planning. How are we going to support this student as they transition from high school to post-secondary? Okay, we want to develop meaningful and realistic post-secondary goals, develop work, education, community participation skills, learn to manage disability technology, stuff like that. And then high school grades 11 and up, transition and overlap into post-secondary environment desired by the students. Okay, and there are our objectives: empower students and families to function in adult environments. Okay, and then, I'm going to run out of time. So I do want you to think about backward planning. So we need to think about where we want the student when they graduate high school, right? And then how we're going to get them there. So thinking, all the way back to grade 1, how are we going to get them there? So go ahead and take a look at page 136 on chapter 6, or in chapter 6. And then I also wanted to show you, I'm not going to show you the clip, but I'm just going to show you, this is an example. If you are a fan of Friends, just search Friends Rachel 30th birthday, and she is backward planning in this clip because she's like, well, if I want to get pregnant when I'm 35. I have to get married when I'm 34, and I want to know the guy for a year, and then it takes a year to plan the wedding. So she's really looking backwards, right? All right, so very quickly, some student planning supports, person-centered planning. We're going to talk about that. Career planning approaches and self-determination approaches. Those are all in your textbook, and those are some student planning supports that we need to start thinking about for them. We also want to think about family planning supports, right? How are we going to get the family involved? And then one more slide, and I have 12 seconds. So the IDEA core planning members should include all of these people, and hopefully you know that by now. All right, that's it for chapter 6.